All right, we're live. All right, I need a shot of gasoline. Hey, what's up, everyone? You haven't seen
Whoa.
us in a long, long time. It's Jack Mangan, and over there is Rich Catino,
What's
and
up?
then we have a special guest who we're thrilled to talk to today. Rich and I have a little bit of news, but I'm can't chomping at the bit to get to this title. But first, we'll say welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean
Yes.
Kelly, the
Hey
author of
guys,
"Don't Call It Hair Metal." Yeah, thanks so much for joining
Yeah.
us, Sean.
thank
Author
you for having me.
and guitarist for Lee Aaron, and you play in Coney Hatch also.
That's correct. That's correct.
There's the cover of the book.
Right. So yeah, we'll definitely get into your resume. Yeah, we've definitely got to get into the book and everything. But I mean, for really quickly, it's all about me. So I'm going to talk about me for a minute. So you guys might know me. I'm with the Metal Hall of Fame and MetalAsylum.net. That's Rich's baby, and also, of course, Am I Evil? The graphic novel. If you don't know, I've published full permission from Diamond Head. I just go off half cocked. I got full permission. We've made the graphic novel based on the song "Am I Evil," and
Wow.
it's through the Indiegogo, and we had a minor production snag, so sorry about that. But it's definitely coming your way really really soon. And if if you're a contributor, you can get the PDF right now. So if you're just like, I got to read this, can't wait for the thing to get in the mail to me. So that's what's up with me. Rich, do you got any news before we get into the heart of our conversation here?
Well, I'm still doing writing for Brave Words. I'm always sending stuff there. And Metal Hall of Fame, my latest article is the one I titled it based off of Sean's book. That was my inspiration because his book is so thorough and it covers the whole decade, right? And it crosses over. It's really good, Sean, at taking the hair metal, but talking about all the other metal that was going on at the same time, like new wave of British heavy metal, the guitarists, who was playing with who, your personal experiences with the music as you're talking about it, and getting quotes from the artists themselves. So it's so well laid out that I was like, let me do an article based on this.
Thank you. It was a great article, Rich. Nice job.
Thank you. So
Great.
before we get into the book, let everybody know you're obviously an author. You can tell the way you write. So what have you written that people could check out prior to this book?
Well, this is my second book. My first book, I actually wrote it. It came out 10 years ago, which is hard to believe, but it was called Metal on Ice: Tales from Canada's Hard Rock and Heavy Metal Heroes. And that was about the music that I grew up listening to, domestic music here in Canada. Bands like Helix and Honeymoon Suite and Lee Aaron and Svengali and Slick
Coney
Toxic
Hatch.
and the mighty Coney Hatch. Yes. And
Aaron.
yeah, all these great bands that I grew up in.
Nova?
Aldo, he was in there too. Now, Aldo, he actually had some U.S. success, right? So he was
right.
He was already popping. So he was on over the radar, in the radar, but not under the radar, like a lot of these other bands were. And I found that reading like all these history books, I'm a music fanatic, so I read everything that comes out about the music I love. It always glossed over the hard rock and heavy metal bands that I loved. And I just wanted to, I was there in arenas, I grew up in a small town, a smaller city in Ontario in Canada. But, we would have bands come and play our 3,000 seat arena and pack them in. So I was like, why aren't we talking more and celebrating these great bands who actually went on and helped to bring the Canadian music industry in the United States? Bands like Helix and Honeymoon Suite getting those American record deals and then going over and starting to kind of,
what about
carve through the brush.
Real quick before I forget, how does Triumph and Rush fit into this when you're talking about that?
Well, Triumph and Rush had already established themselves prior. So when I was getting into music, they were already kind of established entities who made inroads, and they kind of carved their own path. Like I mean, Rush was already an institution by the time I was getting into music. I think it's, in order to get your Canadian license and you're a musician, you got to play Rush songs in the basement. Like that's like your badge of honor.
So and same with Triumph. Did you talk about those two bands in that book, or you kind of focused on the bands that needed more attention?
I focused more on the bands that were, coming to my town at that time, right? Like so it was more about those bands. But I certainly gave a nod to both bands in the book.
Nice. And then of course, what about, I have to ask them, where did Voivod fit in? Were they still also too well known? Or they?
No, I interviewed Michel Langevin away for the book, and it was fascinating to me, like, where they were coming from. Like, he was telling me stories about being from Jonquière, Quebec, and his big influence was Coney Hatch, because Coney Hatch was coming through, man. They were playing in the bars, and he got a chance to see up close. He said, Dave Thumper Ketchum, man, I got to see that guy play, and that was mind blowing, And was very cool, because obviously Voivod went in a much more technical, progressive direction, but where those initial seeds of inspiration came from. Pretty fascinating.
Cool.
How about is Annihilator in there?
Oh yeah, definitely talk about Annihilator.
Awesome.
Actually, it's funny. Jeff Waters came to see Lee Aaron play a couple of years ago. He was still living in Ottawa. And he picked me up, took me for driving his car. We went chatting. I was, he was such a down to earth guy. Like, we were just kind of chatting. I'm going, holy crap! Like, I'm hanging out with Jeff Waters right now. This is amazing to me.
I love them. They're awesome.
What a band, and what a player! Like, and talk about a guy who carved his own path. It's so great to see him being so successful.
So this isn't the topic, but I got to throw two more at you. Then I promise we'll move on.
Yeah,
man. Two more. Then we'll actually talk about hair metal.
Well, yeah, then we'll talk. But it's by two opposite ends of the spectrum. But one of my favorite musicians in the world is a Western Canadian guy, Devin Townsend. Just a complete man. And then on the other end of the spectrum is, of course, you have Chris Jericho, also from out there in the same hood. So I mean, Canada has just contributed so much. I don't know if you touched on them, or if they were too, like, after the pack, or if they're Western or whatever.
Yeah, that would have been a little later. Like, I mean, Devin came into my periphery with his work with Steve Vai. That's when I first found out about him. Right. And then later on, years later, my band Crash Kelly was actually signed to Century Media Records, and Devin was with Century Media. We were on the rock and roll offshoot label. They had an offshoot called Liquor and Poker with us, and Hanoi Rocks, and Backyard Babies, the Helicopters. But I remember my A&R guy who absolutely adored Devin and just had nothing but great things to say. And obviously he's an incredible talent, producer, singer, great guitar player. And the other, Chris Jericho, I mean, I knew about him from wrestling. Obviously I knew about him as a wrestler. And then it was through Metal Sludge, I guess. I really kind of remember the Metal Sludge website, Stevie Rochelle's site. That's where I kind of found out about what he was doing. He's obviously done some great things with Fozzy. So they didn't get in the book, but certainly I'm well aware of both of their achievements.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe we'll circle back to Fozzy, because I think they might kind of be a modern evolution of hair metal. I don't know. That we'll put that up for debate. But
yeah. I can see that.
But yeah, all right. I know we've got a million questions. Rich, why don't you fire away with some? This is not an interrogation now, Sean. This is not an interrogation.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm willing to answer truthfully.
So we got the writing part of it. Now, musically, you had a band called Crash Kelly, which it looks like your first album was in 2003.
Yep.
So musically, as a guitar player, what were you doing before the band Crash Kelly?
Well, I mean, I moved to Toronto when I was 18 from my small town. I was actually studying classical guitar, but the only reason I was studying classical guitar was so I could get a student loan to move to a big city so I could play in bars and try and get a record deal. Because when I was a kid, I used to flip the backs of records over and say, well, look at all the records are made at Warner Music Canada in Toronto, or I'd find the address. I said, well, looks like all these Canadian records all these records are somehow made in Toronto. I better get myself to Toronto. No. I wanted to move to LA, but my parents they were very smart, very supportive, but very wise. Said, well, why don't you get a little background, something just in case, but you could still do music and get to a big city. And that sounded like a good idea. So anyway, moved to Toronto right at 91. So we all know what change was coming around the corner in 91. But when I moved to Toronto, I had my big hair, I had my cowboy boots, and I was ready to go. I was prepared. I found some guys who had long hair too. They were from New Jersey, actually, and they were studying at the music department at University of Toronto. And I said, this is great. Skid Row are from New Jersey. These guys are from New Jersey. And things moved pretty quick. We got together and we started rehearsing. I got a gig at the famous Gasworks. And I think our second gig, I was approached by this British guy. It was Jamie Stewart from The Cult, who had just moved back to Toronto, or his wife was from Toronto, and he was producing bands. And He ended up producing a demo for us. We had some interest, like, and then my bass player said, "Oh, check this out. It's a band called Nirvana."
Ugh.
And it really was one of those moments where you hear it and you go, "Oh, wow, my boots look funny. Everyone else is wearing Doc Martens. What happened?" Like, this was all, they had already had the record come out, but I was somehow oblivious to it. I think that there was this transitory period where you had like Jane's Addiction and Saigon Kick, like bands that were still kind of LA and still kind of rock, but they were a little more weird. And I thought that was alternative. But then all of a sudden there was this thing from Seattle that just kind of cleared the path, and that changed, and I had to adapt. For years I was kind of lost.
So real quick, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
So at that time, did you still, like, for example, I'm wearing Warrant Dog Eat Dog, which is a great album. I think came out in 92 or 93.
Amazing record. Yeah.
So at that time, were you still listening to these bands and listening to what was new, or you kind of just were paying attention to what was new happening?
Well, it was kind of this change, right? Like, so Skid Row had Slave to the Grind out.
Right.
Guns N' Roses had Use Your Illusion. You're still got big rock records, hard rock records.
Which you talk about in your book too, when those came out at the same time as grunge.
That's right. So, like, to me, that was more like, I already moved away from some of the flashier stuff. I like this kind of street thing, but I still like the long hair. I still like the screaming lead guitar. It was still an approach that kept Guns and Skid Row and what Warrant was doing on that Dog Eat Dog record, and some of those bands, Dangerous Toys, like, bands that had more of a sleazier kind of a more bluesy, streetwise vibe.
Harder edge, less keyboards.
Yeah, Bullet Boys, like, but that was still associated with a past that people were ready to move on from. And really, I think it's more of a case of, you had the younger brothers and sisters of the people who grew up with that stuff, and they wanted their own music, as we all do, right? We want our sound. So when that came along, I did start listening to other bands, and I kind of had to adapt. And before you know it, it's a quick transition to, army shorts and Doc Martens. Your hair's still long, but now, oh, wait a second, now I'm wearing this kind of, a plaid vest. And then all of a sudden, oh, maybe I should get a haircut. And then, and then you're lost. And the things that I had grown to love, I really missed, but I felt I had to change. And in a way, that was a good thing. I guess it makes you versatile, but I
come back around to doing Crash Kelly then into 2003 then.
Well, by that point, I'd been through a few record deals. I played in some like alternative bands or pop bands, all good bands, and had some experiences, but I saw how quickly you can get a record deal and lose a record deal. Like, I think we got dropped from, we went on tour to one end of the country, went to the other, came home, and the record was done. Like we hadn't sold any records and we were gone. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, I better figure out something. So I ended up going to teacher's college. I said, if I'm going to starve playing music, well, at least I can feed myself supply teaching while I try and figure out what's going on. But once I got a steady job doing some teaching, it took the pressure off. I said, well, why am I trying to be anything other than what I want? And what I really wanted at the time was something that was a cross between early Sunset Strip, like Motley Crue and Hanoi Rocks type vibe, with 70s glam. That was where my tastes had gone. So I did Crash Kelly. I made a record that I wanted to have on my record shelf. And that was when things started turning around for me. Like, people gravitated towards that. Remember, this was a time when The Darkness was coming out, and it felt like there might be this renaissance. Liquor and Poker came out. We got signed to a U.S. deal.
And some of these bands started coming back, too. They started getting back together, doing package tours and things.
That's right. And we went over, like, we toured with the London Choir Boys. We did a tour in England with them. We toured with Enough's Enough. Like, it felt like there was something healthy happening, and it was for a little bit. So that's where that happened.
And you also talk about in the book, wait, I got to look at my notes because there's so much. Your band opened up for Quiet Riot in 2005.
We did, yeah. Crash Kelly in a little bar in Cambridge, Ontario. But it was a great experience because, Kevin DuBrow took a lot of time. Kevin DuBrow has had a lot of knocks against him for his personality in the early days. But I tell you, the gentleman I met was the exact opposite. Very generous, very kind, and more than willing to sit and share lots of stories. And very friendly, lovely guy.
Nice.
Yeah, I talked to Alex Grossi 2 years ago, and he said the same thing. He said, just forget about all that stuff that he'd heard about him, and they're like, he just said it was just one of the sweetest people he'd ever met. And again, what a talent! I mean, one of the most underappreciated vocal talents, really, of our genre's history. I mean,
I
sounded
agree.
live in the studio.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And they were really the first metal band, right, to come out with a huge hit in '83 with "Come On, Feel the Noise" and "Mental Health." That was like on radio, right?
Well, isn't that an interesting thing? I gleaned this from reading that great Nothing But a Good Time book by Tom Bozier and Richard Beanstalk, that it was really, that whole thing comes about because you have a producer with a concept. Spencer Proffer knew if he could get somebody to sing this song, "Come On, Feel the Noise," he would have this participatory rock concept that he had in mind. And Kevin Dubrow just happened to have the voice. He said, look, here's a band that's never going to go anywhere. They're done. They've been trying to get a deal forever. But he's got the voice. Sing this song for me. We'll cut a couple more of your tunes. I'll give you a production deal. I got a little something with CBS, but you got to sing this song. They didn't even want to do it for all intents and purposes. But as Rudy Sarzo once told me in the studio, thank God for Slade.
Right. They had 2 big hits out of them, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all right. So what else? Just in full disclosure, like I said, I've started the book. Here, Rich, show off the book again. You got that handy? I've started Sean's book.
I got to get you a hard copy of the book, Rich, because I realized we moved so quick. I just sent you the digital version.
Thank you.
Okay. I thought,
where do you want me to go, Jack? Where do you want me to look?
I thought you had the book in front of you, but yeah,
I got it here. I got it all printed out. What do you want me to look at?
Yeah. Okay. I just showing off the cover. Yeah. It's just it's really, as Rich said earlier. All right. I'll go there. I'll talk a little bit more about the writing, because we definitely want to get into the meat of the content too. But I'll say, as someone I imagine myself to be a writer and read a lot, and I've read a lot of rock bios and whatnot, and a lot of these guys are not writers, but you write as clearly a guy who has a passion for a good turn of phrase, and there's so much of that with the lyrical quotes and the clever little stuff. So just talk to me a little bit about, I was surprised really that this is only your second book, so talk to me about kind of where that comes from, where your writing style comes from.
Well, thank you very much, first of all. I appreciate that. I always loved writing. I loved creative writing when I was in high school. I wrote for newspapers, like at university. I'd write music reviews, and I've always contributed articles to music magazines and periodicals. I've even contributed a few things to my friend Martin Popoff's books. I dabbled, but just because I love talking about it and I think about music so much, I'm just constantly looking for avenues to express it. Like, I literally wake up and I wonder, well, what's Mick Cripps from LA Guns doing today? That's what I woke up today thinking. I was thinking about Mick Cripps. I mean, besides me and Mick Cripps, we're probably the one who was doing that, but I want to know, because I find these people fascinating and I'm interested in the humanity of it. So, I love writing and I love sharing and I love reading too. So I think, I've always been a voracious reader, so maybe that inspires it. And I'm Irish, so I talk all the time anyway. So a turn of the phrase, I think maybe you're born with that when you're from Ireland.
How long did it take you to put this together? Because it's a 300-page book. So how long did it take you to put it together? And then let people know some of the names of the people that contribute to this, because there's so many quotes from people and their perspective on this music. It's ridiculous how many people you got in here. So give us those 2 answers.
Well, the first answer, it took me a couple of years. It took me 2 years. And the reason was I wrote the majority of the book before I talked to anybody, which sounds crazy.
Like you laid it all out and planned it all out?
I just started writing. Mm-hmm. I knew I had my story arc was going to be basically breaking it into the 2-year chunks. I knew that. Mm-hmm. And to have a little bit of an origin thing, but it was really almost cathartic. I just wrote and researched too, right? I went through all my periodicals and my magazines and my books and just kind of making sure I was on the right track. But then I wasn't really planning to add as much personal stuff as I did, because initially it was just going to be this hardcore defense, but I abandoned that pretty early, because I realized
you still defend it though.
Oh, I do. I do defend it. Yeah. I do defend it. But rather than I'll show you, Mr. Hip music critic guy, it was more like, I'd like to show you why I like this. Like, like it was just a tone change. That's all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was so I realized that what I was really doing was tracing my arc as a listener, but also as a human being. And like, why did I stay with this music when it's so easily derided by some people? So I think I just wanted to show why it was important to me and trace it and try and somehow make a parallel between the sonic evolution that the music went through and to get, like we were talking about, the voices of these artists and to humanize it. I wanted to humanize it. Here's a guy from the band Kix. Here's Brian Damage Forsyth. He has dedicated his life to music. He's not one ballad that that you heard at a high school dance.
Right. I keep saying that about Warren and Heaven and Sometimes She Cries. Great ballads, but they're more than those songs, especially on Doggy Dog, Well, exactly. And it's funny, Doggy Dog was the album where where Joey Allen's actually playing the lead guitar on the thing. It's not right. We're not relying on the session guys. And this album, which I'm always defending, Winger Pole.
Incredible.
Amazing album. Amazing.
Yeah. And we're seeing that maturity. Like, I mean, you can even make a case like Skid Row, Subhuman Race, I thought was a really fantastic record.
I got that here. Hold on.
Yeah, man.
Or you can say that about Tesla, Bust a Nut.
Yeah.
Right.
Striper, Against the Law.
Yeah.
Wasp, The Crimson Idol. Amazing.
Yeah, they were moving. Wasp was definitely moving into that, even with Headless Children, right?
Headless Children's. Yeah.
The Motley record with Karabi.
The self-titled Motley record. Yep. I got all these here. Even Extreme, 3 sides to every story. Awesome. Yeah. So diverse, right?
Very.
So can I take us then into some negativity before we'll come back into the light again? I'm going to take us into some negativity. So talk to us. I mean, Sean, I definitely want to get your take on this. Just talk to us a little bit about that, the vitriol that, like Lars throwing darts at Kit Winger, talk to me about what that was all about. Not just that incident, but like what everyone was thinking back then with the death to posers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it comes from a couple of different places. Like when it's funny, talking to some musicians I work with who are a little older, who were working time, a lot of it comes from the fact that they couldn't get arrested, where it's like you're constantly being told that your musical worth isn't enough because, hey, your hair doesn't look right, or you don't have the right clothes, or you don't have the right, stage moves. And they're going, but we're musicians. We just want to play. So I think a lot of that comes from people who were forced to the outskirts, now coming back and saying, nah, this is BS. This isn't just about the music. I don't have to have something blowing up on my stage to prove that I'm a good musician. So I think there was pushback against that. I think there was also pushback from the fans about what was becoming very corporately refined about rock and roll, where because you're also, remember, at the end of the 80s, you're starting to get record companies kind of merging together and making these conglomerates, right? So now it's not about the Herb Alperts or the Ahmet Ertegans who are coming in and starting record companies out of their love of music. You got to bring in bean counters. You got to bring in people who can make the money because you've got shareholders that you're accountable to. So you take a look at what's working, and then you get a whole bunch of those things and you throw it all against the wall, and you use the same producer and the same clothing designer, same hairdresser, same video director, and you're just refining everything. Hey, what's big? Bands with W's. We got a Winger, we got a White Lion, we got a Warrant, we got a Whitesnake. We need a W. Where's the W band? And you start getting refined down to the point where it's all the same. And a music that's supposed to be dangerous, rock and roll, has lost its danger. It's toothless now. And one could argue too, the fact that people were trying to get the crossover hits on radio with power ballads, all of a sudden the power ballad becomes a predominant thing. And a lot of these bands are remembered, and a lot of them are great songs and should be remembered.
Yeah.
But Extreme, I mean, is a hell of a lot more than words, right?
So much. And you say that too about, I was going to say, you got a couple quotes in here. You said it about Mr. Big early on. You say Mr. Big is so much more than one song.
Yeah. I mean, right? Look at the lineage there before those guys even hit a note.
Paul Gilbert, Billy Sheehan, right?
Yeah, right. Pat Torpey played with Robert Plant. He was in the Knack. Like, I mean, you want diversity within a band. You got it right there, Mr.
Yeah.
Big. Eric
you can
Martin
hear it
was
in
a
the
soul
music.
singer.
You hear it in the music and you hear it in the albums.
Yes, absolutely. And great power pop. Like, I mean, the focus of that band was really about singing and Beatles and power pop and Big Star, or maybe not Big Star so much with them, but like Todd Rundgren, like there was a lot more going on.
They still had their harder songs, some with a little bit of a metal edge, where they could be put into this term of hair metal, right?
Sure. And there was part of the marketing thing, and part of the reason why I was excited about that debut was, as a young burgeoning guitar player, when you're young, it's the fastest speed, the technical virtuosity, was these guys with the neon guitars,
The two of them in the beginning jamming together, it just blows your mind. You're like,
yeah, man.
Yeah.
I want to do that. That looks fun.
Yeah. Addicted to that rush. That'll blow your speakers out. I remember that song. That song still kills.
It's
But I'm gonna give a quick plug, though, is Sean Kelly's book, Don't Call It Hair Metal, starts off with a really, really great story that made me go out and hear the song that I did not know from Mr. Big. I won't give it away. Go out and check out the book, but it's a really poignant story, Sean, and I appreciate it. I love those little moments where someone makes me hear a song from a new perspective, which you absolutely do. So
thank you. Yeah, the song I talk about, like, that's a prime example of why I wanted to why I wanted to defend it, because I've met enough great musicians over the course of my life that I know that a life devoted to music deserves more than just to be tossed upon a pile of someone's personal bias,
or like you're saying, pigeonhole to a band being tied to just one or two songs, or a type of a song, or a ballad, or a rock song or something, because mostly all these bands were pretty metal when you see them live too. That's the other thing. They weren't just regular hard rock like Journey and Styx. It was harder than that. It was metal. It may be maybe not heavy metal all the time, but it's pretty metal.
Sure. Like, even like Warrant, really, you saw the Judas Priest thing, really. And you saw the Judas Priest in Skid Row, like it was really, like, live, that stuff would come into play. Yeah. I agree, Rich.
Yeah.
So when I saw Opeth about 12 years ago, or I don't know how many years ago, Michael Ackerfeld played the riff to I Remember You, and the whole crowd just went silent. And Michael Ackerfeld said, I saw Skid Row a couple of years ago. He said, I never banged my head so hard. And there's just this silence throughout the crowd. No one could believe that Michael Ackerfeld of Opeth was a huge Skid Row fan. But it's just like, I'm just backing up what you guys are saying. It's absolutely the case. But go ahead, Rich.
Especially pertains to the bands in the first wave too. Rat, Dokken, Wasp, Motley Crue, Helix, everybody. You just that first wave. Even Tesla, Cinderella, that was not just regular rock. That was pretty, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Pretty metal-edged hard rock.
Right? Absolutely, because a lot of those bands you're talking about, especially in the case, I know for a fact with Helix, but Helix and Cinderella, especially the East Coast bands who were doing that bar circuit, you had to go out there and hit them hard. Like, that was the main form of blue collar working class entertainment. And people, after working hard days at the factory, wanted to rock. They did not want to, it wasn't a disco. They were there to get their heads pounded.
I'm going to say it too. Old Bon Jovi too.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yep. Growing up on the shore, man. Like, that's the stuff.
Yeah.
I caught that reference, by the way, Sean. I'm thinking I didn't catch it. This ain't no disco.
Oh, yeah. This ain't no fooling around.
Everybody's showing about a couple more of these chapters, like Visible Roots, Artistic Expression. Then you go to 78, 80. Then you go to 81, 82. You kind of break it up every couple of years. So tell everybody a little bit, what you do with each chapter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you want to start with?
Let's go with the artistic expression, because that's where you get a lot of the guitar players talking about this.
Well, that's where I wanted them to tell me. It's like, I could tell you all day what I think. Mm-hmm. Tell me what the impetus was for creating it. Where are you coming from? Like, I just know, generally talking to Brian from Kicks was really fascinating. It's Southern rock for him. He's coming out of Southern rock. But then you've got this kind of a Cheap Trick influence. People are inspired by what's happening. There's a little bit of a new wave thing going with this kind of core AC/DC thing. So to me, that's an interesting stew. That was fascinating. To hear where Paul Gilbert comes from, like where he pieces together, his parents are listening to 60s and early 70s rock. He's got an uncle who plays. that's the combination, you know, where his thing comes together. So it's really finding what, you know, Mark Slaughter was a real interesting one, how deeply influenced and impact he was by music education.
Wasn't he a guitar player before he was a singer?
Yeah, he's a great guitar player.
Yeah.
And he was coming out of jazz band, you know, being jazz band in Las Vegas, you know, where they had all these heavy guys who were playing in the Vegas shows, would come in and like kind of coach them in their high school, and how he was like barbershop quartet and things like that. It's really fascinating. Or Vivian Campbell, you know, piecing together things in Ireland, you know, and you got Rory Gallagher and Thin Lizzy as influences,
right?
And Mark Bolan, and it was just all very fascinating. So
that's another cool chapter where you talk about what is it, 78 to 80, where you talk about all those classic live albums like Live and Dangerous from Thin Lizzy, Priest, UFO, Kiss, Alive, right? All those great live albums.
Yeah, like to me, you know, in talking to a lot of the engineers, like I talked to Mike Fraser, I talked to my friend Frank Greiner, what they were literally trying to do was capture the sound of an arena show. So I just started thinking, I realized, wait a second, a lot of these guys are listening to live records, because a live record was a chance for, if you might live in Topeka, maybe you're not getting the big arena show, but you've got Kiss Alive, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm experiencing this thing. So guys who are coming up for the next generation they're listening to this live recording, as live as it was, we don't know, but this live recording and getting that feeling, and that's influencing the right bigger, simpler, more anthemic things. And then you get into a studio, and the burgeoning technology is allowing you to actually put a sample on a snare drum where it sounds like you're in the LA Forum. And you know, there's digital delays. Hey, the delays can go longer. We can make this bigger, and everything bigger than everything else, right? To the point where, ironically, you actually end up making things smaller and tinny sounding. But it was a noble effort. And in some cases, I mean, I still put on Invasion of Your Privacy by Rat. And it's such an exciting sound.
Yeah.
It's so cutting edge.
Have you heard the remasters, by the way, that just came out?
I did. I just got the vinyl box.
They sound fantastic, right?
Wonderful. Yeah. And a lot of times that's not the case, but these sound great. And yeah, it's exciting. It was interesting to see how the idea of arena rock, whereas before you were just playing rock and arena, now you're actually trying to make the sound of the arena on the album.
Well, you talk about that too. I'm sorry, Jack. I keep on remembering stuff in the book. I know you got a couple other questions, but you talk about that with Mutt Lange and Def Leppard, High and Dry, Pyromania, and the connection between High and Dry coming out at the same time as Foreigner 4.
Yeah, well,
and the sound and the better sound, right?
Well, that's it. Well, you know, it was, with the Pyromania thing, and you got Mutt working with now they're using emulators, right? They have the technology where it's like, hey, wait a second, I can make this perfectly in time. And while it's true, I love music that swings and moves in and out of time, there is a power that comes, and that was coming with, like, the reason why disco was so popular, why bands like Chic were so popular, a guy like Tony Thompson and Nile Rodgers, those guys could keep it. When you're doing cocaine and you're on the dance floor, that's making you feel good. Don't change, don't slow down. I want to feel good all the time. There is an energy that comes with that, right? So Mutt was capturing some of that with using emulators, you know, and he always let the drummers have a fair shot. He goes, hey, man, you want to be involved in the record? Here's the manual. Figure out how to program this thing, because this is the sound. And that was new, and they were using that. And then you actually have some of the same technicians, like Thomas Dolby, who is programming the keyboards on Foreigner 4, is programming those keyboard sounds on Pyromania, you know? And
when
then
you talk about, it was High and Dry that came out at the same time as Foreigner 4, wasn't that?
High and Dry did, but it was after Mutt had done that work on Foreigner 4 that he applied later on some of the technical things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was retro for High and Dry. Yeah, I remember that.
What was cool about the evolution between High and Dry and Pyromania was how Mutt can actually, this has been confirmed. I did a couple of dates supporting Def Leppard, and I picked Phil Collins' brain a number of times. He said they're all so generous with their information. But he said, yeah, man. And I know Phil wasn't in the band at that time, but he was talking about the process where Mutt, he hears where the band is. It's not about bringing in session players from Mutt necessarily. He wants to hear what you do, and then you become the vehicle for him. But it's your sound. He wants your writing chops. He wants your playing chops, but you are pushed to the absolute limit to attain what Mutt wants and what Mutt hears. Because Mutt has this ability to listen like a 16-year-old kid and be excited about something he's been working on for 6 weeks. Because he like, that's the magic. It doesn't get stale for him. Everyone else is pulling out their hair and they can't stand it, but he's still excited because he's chasing something. It's really fascinating, the psychology behind it.
Cool.
It's pretty cool.
Right, go ahead, Jack. I got like 3 in a row there. Go ahead.
No, all good. It's a good conversation. And actually, since we're talking about production, I got 2 quick comments. I love that you referenced Jeff Emmerich, because again, what a legend the guy was. I read his book. His book's great. And also, I love your comments in your book about the AC/DC sound, because it's such a great point. Again, I'm a guy who obsesses over this stuff too, but I've never really thought about how they're large. Everyone thinks AC/DC larger than life, but you're right. It's such a dry sound. Can you talk a little bit about how that sound, and of course how that ended up being so important for hair metal, the AC/DC studio sound?
Well, what's interesting is, and it was guys like Rudy Sarzo, and actually the bass player in Lee Aaron has mentioned this to me too, Dave Reimer, how it turned into just 8 notes on the bass, as opposed to a John Paul Jones who was moving all around, a Chris Squire from Yes, these really florid bass lines. Even Gene Simmons was playing more like a Motown bass player, playing like these kind of Beatles McCartney lines, that move. AC/DC, boom, 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 driving simplicity with the notes maybe changing a little bit. And then those tight, disciplined rhythm guitars. It's a discipline in AC/DC where it's not, hey, I'm experimenting, witness my new direction as I try this new tuning. It's like, nah, this works. We stick to it and we play it with authority and intensity. And it's funny, that power and that simplicity is often misunderstood in from a guitar perspective as distortion. Hey, they have really distorted guitars. No, they don't. They have very clean guitars played loud and played with power.
And heavy and crunch.
Heavy and crunch. But it's the sound of the speakers being pushed and tube amplifiers being pushed, as opposed to, preamps overdriving everything into this kind of, which is a cool sound too. Don't get me wrong. I like that sound too. But it's always amazing how, and I got a chance to work with Mike Fraser, work with AC/DC, and he kind of showed me like how clean those amps really are. It's like, yeah, you just got to play it better.
I'm out then. Sorry. All right, but yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Actually, so my next question will actually be, or a comment that Chris Preston made. It was a good one. He said, I think in general people don't realize how massively talented the musicians in a lot of these bands are. Good example is Winger, possibly the most musically talented band of the era. So yeah, excellent point, Chris.
Well, you got to figure too, guys. This music has its own channel dedicated to it on Sirius XM. It's become timeless. And then there's a Deep Cuts channel as well on the app, where you get even more songs from these bands, not just the hits. So there's nothing bad about it. They're morally, on a radio channel, aside from mostly everybody's still playing live, right? Everybody still exists mostly.
They do. And the songs, at the end of the day, it is always about songs. And the songs, the best of those songs were some of the best rock and roll ever written. Like, I mean, there's a reason why Poison can go out there and compete with a Def Leppard or a Motley Crue on a stadium tour. Because they had the songs. They had anthems. They could write a song. You had talented writers.
They could do something a little different too, like Native Tongue.
Yeah.
Right? A little more bluesy with Richie Kotzen.
I did enjoy that record, and they were able to adapt. But it's funny. Richie Kotzen can play absolute circles around most guitar players, and CC would probably say the same. But there's no denying, for me personally, like CC belongs in that band, right? Like he's just
that's that sound.
It's that sound, right?
Yeah. But if you listen to I keep saying this, if you listen to the first Poison album, those riffs are metal riffs. Maybe pop. They're pop hooks, but those are metal riffs, especially when you listen to like Want Some, Need Some.
Yeah, look what the Cat Drag.
Number One Bad Boy, Play Dirty, the title track. Those are not just pop rock riffs. Those are metal riffs.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, so I got to ask. I'm going to actually change our direction a little bit. I got to ask about Sean. What do you feel like are the descendants today? I know we touched on Fozzy earlier, but I mean there are plenty of other examples. What do you think are the descendants of quote hair metal in today's music, in today's scene?
Well, I'm trying to think. When I go back to like kind of 2005, there's bands like Avenged Sevenfold and Black Veil Brides that I kind of thought were the bands that were kind of taking the theatricality and then applying it to whatever, like the SoCal punk thing, but with some kind of proficient metal guitars. So I thought that was the first time where I said, oh, okay. Who else is there? Like Murder Dolls. Remember Murder Dolls? And Marilyn Manson, to a degree, you could even argue, was kind of taking the theatricality and some of the showmanship and some of the riffs, but then it was kind of in a new permutation. Yeah, because you can make a case for Fozzy. Bands like Airborne. I think of Airborne from Australia.
Yeah.
And there's like a slew of bands too, like that kind of took a more modern approach, but we're kind of moving into the arena stuff like Blackstone Cherry, even like the Stone Sours and things like that. Like, Corey Taylor's a huge fan of this stuff, right? But I have to be brutally honest. I'm not the right guy to ask because I really don't follow a lot of that stuff. Like I don't listen. I don't actively seek out new bands. I'm kind of committed most of my time when I'm not working on music myself. I'm not committed to just living in the past, but I'm kind of committed. I've got enough of the artists I've committed time to dive into their overarching careers. I find it hard to find the new bands, but there are, I hear it's certainly not dead. I will never say that it's not dead because I just constantly hear things that blow my mind. I can't make the same emotional connection. I think just because of my age maybe, and just the amount of time I devote to other things.
Chris Preston says, check out The Warning.
Yeah, great.
So there you go.
Yeah, there's so many.
I got a few names I'll give you, Sean. When we're off air, I'll give you a whole bunch of them. Listen to the whole whole new generation of them.
Oh yeah, we played with. Who did we play with? Reckless Love.
Oh yeah,
Reckless Love. They were great.
Yeah,
Crazy Licks, Heat, Eclipse.
Yep. Okay, you're on the right track. Yep.
Yeah, well, we played with all these guys at festivals and Monsters of Rock cruises, and like I'm going to Germany. Hardcore Superstar we're playing with in Germany with Coney Hatch. Yep. So you know what? There's probably way more than I'm.
You're on the right track there. You're going the right direction.
Yeah, Dirty Honey. There's another one. I saw Chris come up with Dirty Honey. They were great.
Yeah, and I've
Classless Act.
Shez Kane. Yep, that's a female singer.
Oh, Shez Kane. I was just literally at Sweden Rock. We were waiting for the bus to go back. We went and watched Deep Purple, and we were taking a bus back, and I was hanging out with her and her guitar player.
She's like the next generation Lee Aaron.
She said as much when we played on the Monsters of Rock cruise. She kind of acknowledged that to Lee, which was really cool. And she's great. Shez is great.
Cool.
What would you know about Lee Aaron? Come on. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
Ready, Jack? I got two more I'm going to give him.
Yeah, go for it, Rich. I'll
go
for it.
So in the book, don't call it hair metal. What do you call it in the book? I know how you describe it, but what's your terminology that you like to call it instead of that? And then since we use this article for the Metal Hall of Fame, give me 5 choices from this genre who you think should be inducted into the Metal Hall.
Okay.
Right.
Well, the first thing, what's funny is I actually don't even have that big a problem with it. Like I don't have like the real personal problem with hair metal. I understand if you tell me what you like hair metal, I understand what you're saying. So even in and of itself means it's not, it's fine as a classifier. What I don't like about it is that it usually comes with pejorative attitude. It usually comes with some form of mockery or a turned up thing or some defensiveness where I embrace it wholeheartedly. So if I come to a session with a bunch of musicians say, oh man, I got this idea. It's like a Cinderella riff. It's like a Tom Kiefer riff.
Yeah.
And you go, Cinderella. But if I would have said the same thing, but Aerosmith instead, you would have thought it was cool. And we could have had this really cool thing. But now you've made me feel like a loser. And I don't like that. I'm sick of that. And it's not fair. It really bugs me. Because really the content's the same. And the reason why Tom Kiefer got into music is probably real similar to why Joe Perry got into music. Mm-hmm. So why are you mocking him? Why does he? Because in the 80s, it was commercially viable to look like a petting zoo threw up on you. And that was just why you have the Night Songs album. You know what I mean? Like, but whatever.
The negative connotations and the derogatory terms
Yeah.
that are thrown at it. But meanwhile, the music was huge. It sold millions of albums, timeless songs, right? So how can you can't argue that.
I like pop metal. I like glam metal because I like glam metal because it has illusion. But I like those things because they don't necessarily put image first. But hair metal, you're already leading with an image thing, meaning it takes precedence over
the image. Like I said in my article,
butt rock, cock rock. We get it. You think it's not. It's lesser than.
But the image was just the hair and the clothes. That's part of it. But it wasn't the defining part of the music. Maybe sound-wise, like a Poison's more glam, but Tesla and Badlands were in the family. Not
totally
slightly different, but they all make sense being played on Hair Nation, right?
There was, and it's funny, I looked for the strand of continuity, and I actually found it in talking to George Lynch and Warren DeMartini. And then it dawned on me, these guys were looking to Hendrix. It was an extension of Hendrix's guitar sound that gave those guys this energetic, high-end, clear, interesting voicing thing that's kind of unique to them. I always say DeMartini, Lynch, and Jakey Lee, that's like the holy trinity of post Van Halen LA rock, right? Like that's the next level. That's the Page, Beck, and Clapton of that Hollywood scene. And then you had like kind of Randy and Eddie before that. They're the bridge, but Eddie kind of is on that place with, to me, Hendrix as an innovator, right?
He kind of too. I don't know if you talked about him in the book, but I mentioned them as one of the inductees that I think definitely should go in. Is Y&T and Dave Meniketti.
Oh,
another incredible guitar player, right? Who was around back in the 70s.
Well, it's funny. I watched a show, it was yesterday and today in 1974 at Winterland. And oh my God, Meniketti, what he was playing back then was mind-blowing. He was so far ahead of his time. He was like Neil Schon, like, in the fusion era of Journey. There was something in the water in San Francisco back then, like that Bay Area. Those musicians were killing.
All the thrash bands too that came out of there.
Yeah, and the Y&T thing's real fascinating. Like I think that was a case where had there been no videos, they would have. It was like Christopher Cross. Christopher Cross could sell millions of records till you saw Christopher Cross. God love him. Nothing wrong with him. Beautiful man in my eyes, but to the corn-fed masses of America, not so much. He didn't look as pretty as some of the other ones, right? Okay. And the same. And I think with Y&T, they were big burly dudes. Like they were kind of dudes. They had Phil Kenmore. He was a gorgeous man. But for the most part, you could see them try when they got on like the Contagious record and everything.
Yeah. Which I love. Man, I do love that song, and that riff and that solo is just magical.
Well, see, that's what I loved about that was it was like I did like some of the gloss, but you got the gloss, but you also got the integrity with Meniketti because he can't fake it, right? Yeah. He brings that authority and that authenticity. And when you coupled it, I thought that sound was great. A lot of people used to trash that record, but I thought it was a great record.
Cool record.
Yeah, man, I agree.
And then my second part. Give me 5 bands who you think from this family under the umbrella, because there's a lot of bands in this, category who should be inducted.
Now I know some are, right? Like you got Twisted Sister already in there, right?
Jack, who's in there? You remember more than me.
I would have to check. But yeah, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot is in. Don Dokken is in. By the way, Don Dokken's new song out today. Just sidebar.
Yes.
But yeah,
I haven't heard it yet, but I can't wait.
New Dokken's good.
Yeah, Don Dokken's in. Stephen Piercy was inducted. So yeah, there's definitely some hair metal guys in there.
Tony Harnell from TNT.
Tony Harnell. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, listen, I love TNT. We just played with them in Sweden. Oh my God.
I hope that reunion tour comes to America. I can't wait to see it.
Dude, it was so great. They were so great. But for me, I mean, if you're just talking about acts, not knowing, like, to me, those early troubadour bands, like, I would say you'd have to have Rat, Wasp.
Wasp's not in yet. That's one I picked.
Motley, they must be in there.
Not in yet either yet. So
okay, Rat, Wasp, Motley, on the East Coast, Twisted Sister. I'd even make an argument for Great White, even just because of just being a transitory band, you know, like, and I thought Y&T was really good. I would like to see those. I'd like to see a more chronological thing in Hall of Fames anyway, where you don't have the thing where you've overlooked someone for so long, then they're dead, and then you finally realize they should have been in. But meanwhile, the new guy in the Red Hot Chili Peppers is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, you know, like I think there is something to, if you could kind of keep, it doesn't necessarily mean that the older bands deserve to be more than a newer band or made a bigger impact.
Right.
But I do like the idea of kind of, just for the neatness. Maybe it's just me. I like the neat tidiness of it. Like, you
your
know,
books like that. It's your book's very organized.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
I just beginning and ending at 1990. You know. Yeah,
maybe that's it. Maybe that's why I want to do it. But I don't know. Like, I think that you could go there, and then you could move into the, you know, the ones that had the big commercial apex bands, like the Poisons, the Cinderellas, the White Snakes. You know, like the Bon Jovis. Like really the kind of that commercial video boom when things really start happening. And
how about from Canada? What Canadians think are Metal Hall inductee worthy?
Oh, that's interesting. You know, and on a universal, I would listen just for longevity alone. Never mind that I got to play with them for a bit, but Helix for sure.
Yeah,
I would play. You know, it's funny. Lee Aaron is just getting inducted into our Canada's Walk of Fame, which is not just about music; it's about important Canadians. So that's really wonderful to see. You know, and really Lee Aaron as a pioneer, as a female metal pioneer, like in Europe, she was incredibly popular. And, you know, I could see her being in there. I mean, God, you can make a great case for Anvil as an influential.
I think they're in actually, aren't they, Jack?
Yeah, I think they are in. Yeah. And by the Triumph is in, by the way. But yeah, I think Anvil is in.
I think Anvil might be in too.
Yeah. And actually I think Voivod
Voivod's in.
I got to check,
right?
Yeah.
Yep, Voivod's in. Okay.
So yeah, you do have some decent Canadian representation, but yeah, you're right. I mean, we can always improve for sure. Of course, sometimes it's difficult. You know, sometimes they're obvious. They're like one example I'll give is Black Sabbath, who you touch on quite a bit in the book. Black Sabbath's not in. I mean, that's a no-brainer, but it's not because they're not worthy or anything. Sometimes these things are just take doing. You know, it's just as with anything.
And there's logistics, right? If you're going to I do understand when you have an institution and you're trying to honor somebody, it takes time, it takes planning, it takes availability, it takes, you know, you're trying to make some sense of programming and all that stuff too. So like there's a whole bunch that goes into it, right? So
somebody just said Honeymoon Suite. I mean, they're great, but I think they might be a little too AOR, right?
Yeah, to me, you know, it's funny. I made a case in my book in Metal on Ice. I said I included them, but that was really a very personal story about me saying basically anybody with long hair who wore the leather jacket who showed up at the arena. You had to identify as a kid as something, right? So I'm a metalhead. I like that. It's got to be metal. And I remember being sad when there was a band called Platinum Blonde, great band from Canada. They came and I couldn't bring myself to go because I didn't think it was metal enough, but really I wanted to go so bad. I thought the songs were so good. And I stand out and sit outside the arena.
They're still a great hard rock band. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up in about an hour, and you know, I think we can probably look towards the eggs on this. But this, you know, Sean, I say you're welcome back anytime. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, so we'd love to have you back again.
We'll do a part 2 of this, even though I'm doing a part 2 article, so maybe we could focus on the part 2 article, right?
Yeah. Oh, someone just mentioned Von Groove. Great band. Mike Schotten.
Really cool.
Actually, I play with in a band with 2 of the guys who played in that band too. And so Alan Frew from Glass Tiger in his solo band. So Von Groove was great. They had a big, massive deal. They were like right on the tail end, had a big, massive record deal. And then talk about a band who just suffered from grunge. That was one.
Right. Well, so let's we'll give you a chance, Sean, to take us out. Tell us, what do you have coming up? I mean, obviously you're promoting the book. Tell people about the book and tell us what you got coming up next.
And you're playing with Lee Aaron and you got Coney Hatch going on.
Yeah, man.
And are you thinking of maybe doing another book to, you know, follow up this one maybe?
Yeah, I am. Well, you know, Don't Call It HairvMetal is out. You can get it anywhere you get your books. And thanks for all the support. I just had a great chat with my publisher who told me they're thrilled with the numbers and thrilled with how it's going. So I'm happy about that. The new Coney Hatch record, a live postcard from Germany, actually comes out this Friday on Explorer One and Cleopatra Music. So that's coming out. worldwide. Very excited. The new Lee Aaron record, Elevate, that we've been touring for the last year, is out. I've got tour dates coming up. I'm actually heading out west with her this weekend. Then it's off to Europe with Coney Hatch to play Indoor Summer. So I got that. I'm actually doing an album with Crash Kelly as a companion piece for this record. I'm covering some of the songs from the artists from the book. I'm having a blast with that. So that'll come out later on, hopefully in the fall, late fall. And yeah, man, other than that, working on a documentary. I do have another book coming. I've just got greenlit by my publisher for a new book. And I'll tell you, it's about pointy guitars, a hard rock and history of the pointy guitar. Because I keep buying pointy guitars. My wife wants to get rid of the pointy guitars, but I want more. So why do I want more at 50 years old? Let's find out. Let's write a book about it.
And what's the best place for people to follow you? Where?
I'm at Sean Kelly Guitar on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, not X, but I guess they call it X now, because why would you not want to throw away all that branding? Brilliant move, Elon. Anyway, on that tweeting. You can't say tweet on the X thing platform at Sean Kelly Guitar. And
any chance to see either Coney Hatch or Lee Aaron in America?
Actually, yeah, Coney Hatch is playing on September 23rd in Buffalo, New York at the Riviera Theater with the great Kim Mitchell. So that's my next U.S. date. And Lee Aaron, we were just on the Monsters of Rock cruise, so we left from Port Canaveral, Florida. But I'm hoping that we can get to the States with Lee and with Coney. It's been a long time. Last time I did a proper tour of the U.S. was with Crash Kelly and Alice Cooper, and and a bunch of dates with Nelly Furtado when I was playing her band. But definitely time to get back and bring some rock and roll there. So some Canadian rock.
Right. Well, we look forward to it. Yeah, you come through the West Coast. I'm in the Phoenix area, so come through here and I'll definitely
man.
Catch you, man. But yeah, it's great conversation. So I'll let you guys kind of take us out. I look forward to finishing the book. It's fantastic. Like first couple, 3-4 chapters I've gotten through are just absolutely great writing, great insights. So I'm loving it. I'm great book.
Well,
you guys take us out.
I appreciate talking with both of you guys. You're both great writers and obviously very knowledgeable. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you, my friends.
Thanks for joining us. I'm happy to support the book. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you out there for watching.
Thanks for watching, guys.